It had been a day of outdoor things. Katie discovered that when you wake up in early spring, the birds are very noisy. Orbie learned that some trees have leaves while others are still growing buds. And they both found out that you feel lighter in spring because you don't have to wear winter clothes anymore. Katie and Orbie hadn't been able to go to the park for the last few days because the melting snow had left huge puddles everywhere. But this morning, Mom suggested that they walk to the park and check it out. As they walked along, Mom asked each of them to hunt for things that told them spring had arrived. Katie heard the first and pointed to a tree. A bird was busily building a nest. Orbie found the next. Right along the sidewalk, some little sprouts of green grass were showing. Katie pointed to the tiny buds on the tree branches. That meant new leaves would be coming soon. Hooray! At the park, they were glad to see that all puddles were gone. Even better than that, Katie noticed two other kids on the play equipment. They raced ahead, and as they got closer, Katie could tell that they were new to the neighborhood. She introduced Orbie and herself. The boys said their names were Peter and Gregory. They were brothers. Peter had dark hair and was very tall. Gregory had red hair and was sort of short. They looked very different from each other. Orbie did a flip to get the fun started. Peter leapt up and grabbed a monkey bar. Gregory pulled himself up in the fireman's pole. Katie shrieked with joy and grabbed the trapeze bar. There was nothing like brand new friends. And it wasn't long before they were playing astronauts and shooting rockets to the moon. Then they were airplanes. As they whirled around the playground, something occurred to Orbie. Peter and Gregory didn't look very much alike for brothers. Mom was talking to the boys' mother, Sarah, and Katie noticed that they seemed to be having a nice time. Well, they played for a few hours as the moms watched and chatted. Then Mom invited everybody home for a snack. When Sarah agreed, a certain amount of cheering and tooting went on. At home, the moms set about making some cheese flying saucers on English muffins. Upstairs, Katie, Orbie, and their brand new friends played Go Fish, and every time Orbie had to go fish, he made a fish face with gurgling noises. Giggles streamed out of the room. As they were playing, Katie told them that she was 5. The boys said that they were both exactly 5, too. Katie asked if the boys were twins, the kind who didn't look exactly alike. The boys shook their heads and smiled. They said they were stepbrothers. Just then, Mom called, "It was time for cheese flying saucers." The two boys, who had never had them before, raced out of the room with Katie and Orbie right behind. They all sat down at the kitchen table, and I have to say, Katie and Orbie were still a little puzzled. They had no idea what being stepbrothers actually meant. But just then, the flying saucers arrived. They had olive slices around the side like little windows and tomato rings on the top, and the cheese drizzled down and looked so delicious. Orbie lifted his off the plate with a great flying saucer noise. He flew it around slowly, then he hovered it right in front of his mouth, and with a zip, he popped it in. There were loads of thank yous and yums and "this is delicious" going around. Well, Katie couldn't wait any longer to find out what exactly a stepbrother was, so she asked her mom. And her mom explained that it meant that Peter and Gregory were from 2 different families who have come together through marriage. Well, I have to say, Katie and Orbie still didn't understand. Sarah explained that she and Gregory's dad used to be married, but they had a divorce. A divorce meant that they were not married anymore. Katie and Orbie looked at Peter and Gregory. They were eating their flying saucers happily. Then Sarah explained that Peter's Mom and Dad, were also not married to each other anymore. After some time passed, Gregory's mom and Peter's dad met, and they fell very much in love. When they knew the time was right, they decided to get married. That meant Gregory and Peter became part of the same new family. That's what it meant to be stepbrothers. Orbie thought that was a great idea and tooted, "Hooray!" And later, when they were floating paper boats in the backyard puddles, Katie asked Peter if he missed his mom. He gave her a great big smile and said he saw his mom all the time. Gregory did the very same thing with his dad. Peter pushed his boat across the puddle. Orbie reached down to get it and fell kersplat in the mud. And when he sat up, he had a great big dollop of mud on the end of his nose, which he blew off. All the friends laughed, including Orbie. He spun himself so quickly that the mud flew all over, and everybody shrieked and ducked out of the way. And then Peter told Katie something important. He held out his hands to show how big a heart is and explained, even though your heart was small, there was tons of room in it for new people to love. You could never fill it up. Katie smiled. Gregory was giving Orbie a piggyback ride around the puddle, and Orbie was pretending to be a cowboy. Katie looked at Orbie and realized that it was true. When Katie had first met Orbie, her heart had lots of love in it for her family. But then her heart had made room for Orbie, too. She smiled at Peter and asked if he wanted to see a bird's nest. He grinned. In a flash, they were off with a Gregory horse and a pink cowboy following close behind. And I hope that if you meet some stepbrothers or stepsisters, or have them yourself, you'll remember what Peter said. Even though your heart is small, there's tons of room in it for new people to love.
Did you know? There's a fish called a dab. It's a really flat fish that lives on the bottom of the sea. It has skin that changes to match wherever the fish is swimming, whether it's green grass or a big gray rock. Wouldn't it be neat to see a fish that looked just like a rock, or the grass, or even a checkerboard?